This is going to be slightly longer than the last story that I read. It's The Little Match Girl by Hans Christian Andersen. It's one of my favorites and fitting for the holiday season. Maybe a little bit early, but that's okay. It was so bitterly cold. It was snowing and the evening was growing dark. It was also the last evening of the year, New Year's Eve. In this cold and in this darkness, a poor little girl was walking along the street. Her head was uncovered and her feet were bare. To be sure, she had been wearing slippers when she left home, but what good was that? The slippers were quite big. Her mother had used them last, and they were so big. And the little girl had lost them when she hurried across the street just as two carriages went rushing past at a frightful speed. One slipper was nowhere to be found. A boy had run off with the other. He said he could use it for a cradle when he had children of his own. There walked a little girl, now on her tiny bare feet, which were red and blue with cold. In an old apron, she had a lot of matches, and she carried a bunch in her hand. No one had bought any from her the whole day. No one had given her a single shilling. Hungry and frozen, she looked so cowed as she walked along, the poor little thing. The snowflakes fell on her long golden hair, which curled so prettily about her neck. But of course she didn't think about anything as fine as that. The lights were shining out from all the windows, and there in the street was such a delicious odor of roast goose. After all, it was New Year's Eve. Yes, she did think about that. Over in a corner, between the two houses, one of them jutted a little farther out in the street than the other. She sat down and huddled. She tucked her tiny legs under her, but she froze even more, and she dared not go home. She hadn't sold any matches, hadn't received a single shilling. Her father would beat her, and then, too, it was cold at home. They had only a roof above them, and the wind whistled even when the biggest cracks had been stuffed with straw and rags. Her tiny hands were almost numb with cold. Alas, one little match would do so much good. Did she dare pull just one out of the bunch and strike it against the wall to warm her fingers? She pulled one out. Scratch! How it sputtered, how it burned. It was a warm, clear flame, just like a tiny candle when she held her hand around it. It was a strange light. It seemed to the girl that she was sitting before a huge iron stove with shiny brass knobs and a brass drum. The fire burned so wonderfully, so warming. No, what was that? The little girl was already stretching her feet to warm them too when the flame went out. The stove disappeared. She sat with a little stump of the burned-out match in her hand. And when one was struck, it burned, it shone, and when the light fell on the wall, it became transparent like gauze. She looked right into the room where the table was set with a gleaming white cloth, fine china, a splendid steaming roast goose stuffed with prunes and apples. And what was even more splendid, the goose hopped down from the platter and waddled across the floor with a fork and a knife in its back. Right over to the poor girl it came. Then the match went out, and the only thick cold wall could be seen. She lit a new match. Now she was sitting under the loveliest Christmas tree. It was even bigger and had more decorations on it than any one she'd ever seen through the glass door of the rich merchant's house last Christmas. 1,000 candles were burning on the green branches, and gaily colored pictures like the ones that decorated the shop windows looked down at her. The little girl stretched out both hands in the air. Then the match went out, and the many Christmas candles stove, the wonderful roast goose, and the big, heavenly Christmas tree. She had hastily struck all the rest of the matches in a bunch. She wanted to keep her grandmother with her. And the matches shone with such radiance as it was brighter than the light of day. Never before had grandmother been so